wickedness. So welcome to today's, what I think is an incredible event. You may not know this yet, but you will understand why I am saying that. My name is Sandrine Dixon de Clèves. I'm the co-president of the Club of Rome, and I have the esteemed honor to also be part of what we call the Action Track Chairs for the UN Food Systems Summit. And for those of you who were part of the UN Food Systems Summit, the Action Track Chairs were the ones that were bringing together 5 key action tracks across the board, looking at the issues of hunger, biodiversity, healthy food, resilience, and the social elements of the food system. And I had the esteemed pleasure of being with my colleague Salim Hop, who is here as Mr. Damage and Loss Adaptation, working with all the vulnerable countries, and so giving a huge hand to the work that you're doing, Salim. But why is today so important? Because coming out of the UN Food Systems Summit, the Action Track Chairs very much decided that all the incredible wealth of experience, of stakeholders, of solutions, game-changing solutions that we received had to carry on. And that's what this morning is going to be about. It's going to be how do we bring all those solutions together and think concretely together how we can work forward to truly make food systems front and center in terms of the discussion of climate change, biodiversity loss, lives and livelihoods for people on this planet to ensure that we have prosperity. So I'm going to start by introducing our incredible chair for this session, Marie-Claire Graaf, who she and I have known each other for now probably about 3 years, because Marie-Claire has been doing so much for UNGA and really working through as a youth representative of the UN on the SDGs, really promoting the importance not only of the youth voice, but what the youth can bring to understanding and unpacking the SDGs. So I'm going to let you actually continue, Marie-Claire, and introduce the next session.
Thank you, and hello and welcome everyone. People who are physically here in the room, but also everyone who is on Zoom. We're very happy to have you all here. So first, also let me thank for all the co-organizers of the session. They are all here. This is EAT, GAIN, WWF, ICCCID, and then there is CARE as well. So thank you everyone who brought us here. Very quickly, probably you know all the facts, but the food system is like the major cow in the room here at COP, and unfortunately not so much talked about, but with the whole food system summit, I think we really could bring a big momentum to the really, that the food system is so crucial to the climate crisis. We could really build up momentum, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we have the negotiations here. Unfortunately, they are not so ambitious as some of us would like to see the food system represented. That's why this session is particularly important on how we can really strengthen this cow in the room. Food systems are contributing to around 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions, are a big part when it comes to deforestation, when it comes to land use, when it comes to water use, all of this. And solving our broken food system is the major solution to the climate crisis. It's really the major solution. I think this is really important that all of us are really advocating very, very strongly, especially in these spaces here, that food systems must be at the heart of the climate negotiations. And I really hope that these last days can also be used now with the high-level segment to really bring forward the food system as a major solution to the climate crisis. And I hope that all of you are also joining and advocating for this, as it's very, very crucial. Also, when it comes to young people, so many young people are not attracted by the current food system, how it's working, but there are so many young people who would actually love to do something new, innovative. Yet there is a dogma, and very often young people that's why they're not so attracted in the food system. That was also what was one of the major outcomes from the Food Systems Summit, where I had the privilege to work with the Food Systems Summit leadership team directly together, as I was the vice chair on youth. And here in the negotiations, I'm leading the youth constituencies, representing the voices of young people in the process. And we can really see how many young people are interested and really are crucial to and want to be part of the food system and climate discussions. First, I have to also give you some housekeeping rules that I'm not forgetting anything. Everyone who is here in person, you have to wear the mask at all time unless you're here on stage, then you have the privilege to take it off. And everyone who is on Zoom, you can ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we will take them later on. Wonderful. Are there any questions just for now, also in the Q&A? No? Then I'm handing over back to you, Sandrine, for inviting us for the first panel. I'm super excited.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. And I would like to invite my esteemed colleagues to join me here on the stage. What we want to do now is present to you a little bit some of the work that we've done through the UN Food System Summit, but really where we are now in our thinking. And you'll hear about the incredible new idea that we've come together with. So please, join me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to... Gunhild and Salim, to introduce a little bit how you came into food and why it's so important to you, what you feel you got out from the UN Food System Summit, and then talk a little bit about our idea around the consortium and why it's so important. So maybe I'll start with Salim.
Sure. Hello, can you hear me all right? Thank you very much, Sandrine, and good morning to everybody. There you are. My name is Salim Al-Haq. I'm the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development at the Independent University Bangladesh, based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And I'm not sure if it's the privilege, but I've certainly been to every single COP that's happened so far. This is my 26th COP. So this is my territory to which I welcome all of you. And food systems was not my territory. I got invited by the UN to co-chair the Action Track 5 on resilience together with Sandrine, and actually resisted. I said, I'm not a food systems person. Why are you asking me? But they said, resilience to climate change, you've worked on that a lot. It's relevant for food systems. So I agreed, and I've been working together with Sandrine on Action Track 5, but then also the other action tracks. And I'll just share in a few minutes my reflections on the UN Food System Summit and compare it to this process, which I'm much more familiar with. This is an extremely government-driven process. They are negotiating till the wee hours of the night. They've just come up with a presidency text that's going to be rehashed again over the next 2 days. Hopefully we'll get something at the end. But at the end, everything is diminished because it's always by consensus, and you get the lowest common denominator. It just kills any kind of ambition, any kind of really moving at the pace that is needed. And I'm predicting that will happen again. I've been here 25 times. I've seen it. Occasionally, we are able to do things like the Paris Agreement. That really was the pinnacle of our achievement, and now we need to implement it. But with the Food System Summit, we tried to do something very different. The 6 co-chairs, 5 tracks with 6 of us, were given a mandate to speak to everybody. We did hundreds of meetings with youth from all the continents, with farmers, with fishers, with companies, small companies, big companies, with officials from different countries, with the ambassadors of the countries in Rome and in New York, but they didn't control what we were doing. We had a free mandate to come up with solutions, ideas, which we solicited, and we got thousands of them. And we put them into various categories. We changed those categories over time, and we finally took them to the summit. And where the summit endorsed some, not all, some of them got endorsed officially by the summit, and they are now going forward as alliances of different actors, government and non-governmental actors. But the 6 of us in the process of putting all of this together felt that wasn't enough. And we didn't want to stop our involvement. So we have agreed that the 6 organizations and 6 people involved in the action track chairing, we will continue our work together. And from my point of view, resilience is going to be the key. Food system resilience to me was the underlying issue. And in the context of climate change, food system resilience in the context of climate change is really my area and territory where I will be hoping to contribute as we go forward. And just on a final note, in this process, for those of you who aren't familiar with what I do here, I work as an advisor to the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is now 55 countries. When we came here, there were 48. 7 countries have joined us now. So 55 countries. And it's a leadership forum. It's currently chaired by the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, my Prime Minister, who was here at the beginning speaking. The former President of Maldives, President Nasheed, is the originator. He started it 11 years ago. He's still here. He's going to be here till the end. He's speaking on behalf of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. And so we are pushing for ambition. The vulnerable countries are pushing for ambition, staying below 1.5 degrees as we have agreed, for the developed countries to provide the $100 billion a year that they promised but haven't delivered on. And now a new issue that we now have to take care of or address, which is loss and damage from climate change, which is now a reality, and that's my particular area of work here. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll get some good text in the final decision here.
Yes,
we
and
shall
we're all
see.
supporting you, sending you
Thank
lots of good vibrations, Salim, because I know it's not easy. Gunhild, and thank you, Salim.
Thank you, Sandrine, and thank you, Salim. So I start with your question, Sandrine. So I'm a medical doctor by background, and I'm an environmentalist at heart. And I came in to food, stepping into all the food-related challenges when I served on the board of a big hospitality company in Scandinavia. And this was back in 2011, 2012. And at that point, there was nothing from science looking across. There was no arenas where all the stakeholders involved in food-related challenges could come together. So together with Professor Johan Rockström, I started the EAT Foundation in 2013 and had the first Stockholm Food Forum in 2014. And from 2014, 8 years ago, to where we are now with the first ever UN Food System Summit, we have come a long way. I think, in addition to what you mentioned, Salim, with a very innovative process we did with the action tracks, I think what we have achieved with the UN Food System Summit, first and foremost, is a massive shifts in mindsets. As a result of the process, more than 140 countries have held their own food systems dialogues at the national level, multi-stakeholder, cross-sectoral, starting to discuss across ministries and with farmers and business and everyone at the table. And they realize that food is a system. That system is highly inefficient, it's dysfunctional, it's broken, and unless we fix it, we don't stand a chance to deliver on the SDGs nor the Paris Climate Agreement. But from there, understanding it to actually roll up their sleeves and get things done, it's a long way. As a result of these food systems dialogues, more than 100 countries have now embarked on their national pathways to sustainable, healthy, equitable food systems, resilient food systems by 2030. These pathways are a mixed bag, very fluffy. They need to be filled with content. And importantly, they need to be linked to the NDCs, because it doesn't make sense at all that you have, when food is 1/3 of the emissions and not integrating that, not only from the agricultural side, food waste and loss, and as importantly, healthy and sustainable diets. But in addition to having a very good starting point for further action, we also now need to continue with the multi-stakeholder process. We need obviously to position food at the front and center of COP27 and beyond, but we also need to allow for civil society, private sector, including investors, to help the UN. We still don't know what the UN will do in terms of follow-up and review, except that there will be a hub. And what the 6 action track organizations and 6 action track chairs have decided to do, because we have had more than 500 individuals, organizations, network working with us and investing their time and energy. So we feel committed and responsible to continue and forging forward with some more alignment, supporting and complementing whatever the UN will do. And that is why we are here, and really would also like to talk to you about how such a consortium could really work and offer an enabling fabric. Not another layer of complexity or a top-heavy organization, not what we're talking about, but how can we really drive some really important work at the global level, including setting targets, including developing a true value of food metric, and really then support countries, especially the most vulnerable, perhaps in really undergoing transformation at the national level.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gunhild. And I've just been alerted also. Juan, you're here calling in. Juan, I don't know if... Hi, Juan. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. And what we've tried to do here is we will have a fully hybrid session, because there are many people who have not been able to join us physically. But it's wonderful to have you here representing in particular your incredible colleague, Christine Campo, who's been working with us also as an Action Track chair, CARE International, working in terms of Action Track 4, really looking at the social impacts of the food system. So, Juan, would you like to say a few words on behalf of CARE International?
Sure. And thank you so much, Sandrine. And hi, Sally, and hi, Gunhild. And thank you for your excellent and for your very powerful messages. As Sandrine said, I'm Juan Echanove, and I'm the Senior Director for Food Systems at CARE, which, as you know, is a global organization focused on tackling poverty and rights in social justice. And we were leading, as Sandrine said, the action track on equitable livelihoods as part of the UN Food Systems Summit. And I'm delighted to be here today, joining so many champions on food systems policy, including, of course, Martin Frick, which is also joining us, and Jemima, and all the leads of the action track. So what an amazing community of committed people. Let me start saying, Sandrine, that the global climate crisis threatens CARE vision, and I guess our collective vision, shared by all of us here, of a world of hope, a world of inclusion, and a world of social justice. And I think the key issue to retain here is that climate change causes further poverty, and poverty undermines virtually all and each and every human right. More people are hungry now than ever in the last years. And this is driven by a number of well-identified causes, right? By COVID-triggered economic crisis for sure, by conflicts, and by climate change impacts. And in fact, conflicts are scaling up in many places, like in the Sahel or in the Horn of Africa, in relation to things like water scarcity or drought. So you can also see the link between those conflicts and the rise of climate change. So in short, in various different ways, climate change augments hunger and poses a tremendous threat for people to enjoy the right to food, which is a basic human right. Let me also add something, which is that women and girls
you're on mute.
Are really affected. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
No, and I was saying that I would also like to reflect that women and girls are affected the most, but they are often the ones contributing the least to climate change. That's the irony. And they are marginalized from conversations on how to respond to climate change. So we must not lose sight of the human suffering that occurs, during and long after the climate catastrophes triggered by climate change. Every fraction of a degree matters, we know that, to the people already in the front lines of the climate emergency. So the climate crisis will not be addressed without addressing human rights violations. In particular, I would say that there is a need for an holistic approach that addresses the economic, the social, the cultural, and the political dimensions of climate change and how it affects food systems. So in short, Sandrine, I believe that addressing human rights will also empower the most affected groups, including the youth, including the women, as I said, and allowing them to implement, monitor, and actually keep focus on the issues that they really prioritize and that have been largely captured in the national dialogues and informal dialogues that happen in the context of the UN Food Systems Summit. Thank you, Sandrine.
Thank you so much for bringing in the human dimension. So incredibly important. And in particular also in Action Track 5, like yourselves, we were very much wanting to bring universal access to food as one of the key principles of the outcomes of the Food Systems Summit. the social equity elements of this are so incredibly important. And also the people that are on the front lines, whether it be smallholders, whether it be women, so many stories of women and youth that in particular when they were in conflict zones, but also being hit by COVID, were the first ones who were still ensuring that there was access to food for their communities. So very important to have all stakeholders involved. Thank you for that. I wanted to turn to all of you and to see if anyone has a question, because we're incredibly excited. Let's be clear, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I think that Gunhild mentioned that there were probably about 500 stakeholders that got involved in this process. There also were about 500 meetings between these organizations during the process. And what happened was we became very close. This is also a personal journey. And I think it's really important because what happens when people actually live personal journeys is that they create a level of trust, which we've been able to do between our organizations and all the different stakeholders. We call ourselves actually the Six Musketeers. And we will continue to strive through this consortium to make sure that we bring food systems across the board, as we said, to the climate negotiations, as we're doing here now, and to COP27, but to also the CBD COP, to so many other joined up discussions, whether it be the next G20, the next G7, because that's also fundamental, that countries actually start to be held accountable across the board with regard to the impact of food systems. So I don't know if there's anyone who has a question on how the Six Musketeers, and I would add Martin Frick, who's not here, but representing the UN, who worked with us intimately and is the seventh musketeer, how we're actually going to develop our consortium. Are there any questions to any of us, any thoughts, any reflections? And we will continue throughout the day or the rest of the time as well. Gunhild.
Can I just add one point before we open the floor? Because it's we were quite superficial. It's early days, so for now it's a commitment to co-design this consortium, building on everything that's out there, not duplicating, but really adding additional value. And that is why it's important to do these kind of consultations. We are already starting to socialize the idea with funders. We think we need to talk about something like 200.
We can hear you super well when you take the microphone.
Okay, Gunhild, put your mask on.
Give it to me. So we think this is an opportunity to really create some connective tissue between different initiatives, different projects. There are a lot of coalitions out there now swimming, as born at the Food Systems Summit and other food systems related initiatives. So this would really be a way to forge more alignment, and again, complementing and support whatever the UN will be doing. We are talking about doing a design workshop early next year, but really want to collect as much feedback as possible and co-create and co-design. And we would love for you to join and be part of this journey, because we believe that countries, they are ready for action, but they will need help. And we can't do this without a multi-stakeholder approach and unprecedented collaboration. So, open the floor.
Wonderful. While Salim gives a remark,
yes.
We've got a question over there. We'll take you next. Go ahead, Salim.
Right. I just wanted to add a little bit of our personal journey here that Sandrine mentioned. We were scattered all over the world. Joao was in Brazil. Christine was in Canada, our two colleagues here were in Europe, and I was the furthest east in Bangladesh. So when we had these calls, and we had them, more than once a week, I was the one who'd have to be awake till midnight to be on these calls.
Heroic.
But it was great fun. And the reason why I did them was that we got together so well, and we were so like-minded. And that's really what's compelling us to do what we're now doing, because our
Yes.
job is finished.
Yes.
The action tracks are over, the summit is over, but we felt, no, we don't want to end this journey. We want to
Exactly.
continue.
Yes.
Exactly.
And we still don't know what we're going to do. That's why we want to consult with
Yes.
you, but we are going to continue.
Thank you for that honesty, Salim. I think you're absolutely
Exactly.
right.
Exactly,
So we have a
Salim.
question here, and then probably if we don't have a quick question, I'm going to get hit by Marie-Claire, who's going to say, and she's already given my time. But one question, Marie-Claire, is that okay with you? Thank you.
I just want to say, my name is Christian Mann. I work with Just Rural Transition, and I help lead the the coalition on repurposing public support to food and agriculture. I know that leading up to the Food System Summit, the events of the final 4 to 6, 8 weeks were a bit unexpected, but the amount of organic energy that was developed in our working group through that coalition has been extremely vital and important with Martina, with a number of UN agencies, but not just UN agencies. And I just want to say it has mattered and it's going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what we want to hear. So organic energy that keeps us going, and let's not turn it into waste, right? Because we know the impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Is there one last question or remark, and then we'll turn to the next panel? Okay, good. Joao, I think you're on, and Marie-Claire is going to lead us through the next process.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandrine, for moderating. Thank you so much, Gunhild, for all your input. Salim, and also Juan, who already left us from the screen. Next, we have... Yes. I don't know...
Yeah, he was supposed to be here.
Yes. Yeah. Gonzalo Munoz next. Yes. Yeah. So next we will have a keynote from Gonzalo, who is about to come, and he was appointed back at COP25 as the UN high-level champion for COP25, directly by the Chilean president. The high-level champions, for everyone who do not yet know, they are. You can explain this much better than me, but they are basically creating momentum about non-state actors. As you all know, at the COP we have the state actors coming here together to take the decisions, yet we all know we can't achieve anything if the non-state actors are not on board, if the non-state actors are not empowered to go in the same direction as we are here discussing at the COP. I think when you have been appointed, you didn't know that you sign up for a 2-year mandate, one of the most challenging probably with the whole pandemic. But also I don't know if you actually knew that there's the Food Summit coming, and there is so much momentum around food, and that's why it's particularly exciting to have you here. Before you have been appointed, you have also been co-founder of 2 different companies, if I got this correctly. Tricolor is a recycling company, one of the biggest ones, and you are also part of the B-Lab International Advisory Board and many other advisory boards, and do great work. But today you will talk about food and why food system transformation is so crucial, and we would really like to hear from you what you have been doing as well for the food system transformation, how you can also support the work which is ongoing, and what you can give them on the way. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Marie-Claire, and beautiful things that you missed. You didn't know why you should, but background is in food production. Sorry, can you hear me there well? So for 10, I've studied agronomy and veterinary medicine. All of my background is around food production. I run food companies for 10 years as a CEO. Then my first entrepreneurship, and I'm still running it, is a winery. I'm farming grapes for wine, and also walnuts. So the topic is not only as part of my history, is part, of course, of my passion, but was also, as you said, I didn't know that I was joining a role for more than 2 years. I didn't know the role at all. That's truth to be said. I had no idea. When I was appointed, so Minister Schmidt and President Piñera called me for this role, and they said, like, the United Nations High-Level Climate Action Champion. I didn't get any word, probably United Nations. The rest was, what is this about? And honestly, the other thing that I did not know was food and nature was not in the center of the agenda. So coming from the outside, that was the first thing that surprised me about the agenda. Is how do you think we're going to solve this major crisis without putting nature in the center? Who thinks that this is possible to be solved just by implementing new technologies that will reduce the emissions, but without first stopping the destruction of nature, and second, without using the power of nature to become the major sink of the emissions that we have already created. So that was my first approach. The second approach, of course, I think that probably most of us kind of share, is some kind of frustrations of sometimes how slow the process is, on how much it takes in terms of energy to position certain topics. I can imagine that all of us are feeling that tension. So Sandrine, so much empathizing with most of what we've been hearing from you. We've been crossing it's like the pain of birth. That's it. This is the pain of allowing something to come to life. Food in the center of any kind of agenda. On one side, nature in the center, and that comes with pain. We know that. We have to be the midwives of food and nature in the center, as probably we have to be the thanatologists of things that need to die, hopefully in a very peaceful way, because we require justice in that sense always. I was trained wrongly in the university. I was trained to produce food in the wrong way. And it took me quite a while to understand all of those mistakes. So I've been learning so much from people like you, from people like Fede, from people like our team that have been retraining us, that come with the wrong mindset on our approach on what's the role of food. Yeah, we need to stop hunger, but we cannot do it in any way. We cannot do it with the idea of the Green Revolution. That was wrong. We need to do it in a way that will restore nature, that will regenerate the capacity of soil to keep on bringing the required biodiversity and become the sinks. I mean, I don't know how many of you received that wrong training on monoculture, on monoproducts. That is for me, right, coming from that side, is the most tragic mistake on how we have been brainwashed and how much we need to retrain ourselves, and that means retrain millions, or if not billions, of farmers all around the world, that we think that seeing a fantastic landscape of just one species, all the same size, is something beautiful. And now we see the tragedy. And we see the same thing when it comes to how we feed in terms of protein, right? We're feeding ourselves mostly with 9 species, while, for example, there are more than 1,200 edible insects that can help us replace so much of that protein. We know that. We know that we have to learn in a different way. And I share the frustration of what were expectations when it comes to the United Nations Food System Summit, but this was part of the pain of allowing food come to birth and be here now in the center. I honestly expect that it will only grow. I do expect that the connection between nature and the financial promises will allow us to have a very successful COP27. I do expect a lot when it comes to the CBD. And I do expect that we can allow those dots to be joined. We cannot allow every single initiative to be proposing ideas separately, but rather all of us being integrated in a way that we can propose the right framework and the right path ahead for all of those people that are outside of these rooms. And I say, please don't confuse us anymore. Give us concrete tracks. Give us simple ideas that we can follow and that be very practical, that I can implement on a daily basis in my farm, with my customers, with my providers, even at a very small scale. And we have to, of course, embrace all of the opportunities and the challenges that are related to making Africa a continent that will position themselves as in the leadership position, but also we have to be able to speak to the Midwest farmers in the US. That is a massive, not only political, technical challenge that we should not. Sometimes we're talking amongst us. And that's great because we can embrace and we can take a lot of common learnings. But if we will fail if we don't speak properly to the African farmers and to the Midwest farmers. I would just refer to all of them, and you know that I'm speaking to many others as well. So, sorry, now I will refer to the text that I brought. I got quite excited. But I know. Now I will refer to very general ideas. One, of course, we need to think exponentially, right? It's not about, we don't have much more time to keep on piloting. We have to scale them very rapidly. This is the moment when we have to accelerate. So of course, we know that standards matter a lot, but we need to get them right when thinking about food system transformation. And having too many standards, I know it's just bad as too few of them. We need, of course, that instrumentation is just as important, if not more, than commitments. Credibility is all in the center of this agenda. We need to make the work that we're doing credible. That means traceable, with integrity, bringing science into a center, and communicate very properly. The Good Finance Network Financial Toolkit with members of the Food Forward Consortium and tested with crucial stakeholders like the World Bank and other investors is a great example of this. We have to care for the process and following the principles of equity, inclusion, health, diversity, interconnectedness, and renewability, and therefore, of course, all the time involving farmers, indigenous people, consumer health providers. We have a plan on implementing the Marrakesh Partnership in a very way all around the world. That's part of the 2022 agenda for the champions, and we will need some of you know very well what the 4 Ps for Race to Zero and Race to Resilience means: pledge, plan, proceed, and publish. We're adding a 5th P. It's policy. How we can stop any type of lobby against this type. Never mind. Sorry. So we're adding a 5th P for both mechanisms. So it means that every single actor that is really promoting a decarbonized industry would need to incorporate the right policy initiatives into what they do. And of course, we need unprecedented level of innovation. When it comes to this industry, this is one of the industries that already crossed what we call the ambition breakthrough. We have 28% of the major food producers globally being part of Race to Zero. That is massive. That is what we call the first change. Now we need to see how they are implementing the regeneration practices and how they incorporate all of the circular economy practices, how they stop food waste, how they incorporate that in an inclusive and just way. And that will be related to how do we all help them, and help me as a farmer as well, accountable for those promises. So, I mean, you know that with my dear brother and friend Nigel Topping, we have been pushing this agenda probably into a stage because we had also the privilege of having an extra year, but mostly because we have been collaborating with all of you. And we need for that to continue. We need the community to keep on working to activate the ambition loop and use the Marrakesh Partnership as one of probably the best ways to incorporate that logic on a systemic view coming from the non-state actors that should be activating the ambition loop in any country of the world. So with that, I do expect that we will have this agenda much more in the center of COP27, that we will end the birth now this year. This will be the year that we'll recognize of this coming to birth, and next year we'll see the toddler giving like the first like concrete steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much also for sharing your personal reflection despite having many calls with you for the last 2 years to climate in regards to food system. I didn't know about your winery and about all your food practice. That's why it's so great to meet people here to talk about all of this. Thank you so much for your remarks, and looking forward to working together with you. But now let's move forward to the panel discussion with the most impactful solutions. I already mentioned food systems as such is a win-win-win solution, but within the food system there are some very influential solutions as well. And I'm very glad that Juan Campari will moderate the next panel. He is working at WWF International and has over 20 years of experience. It's always a little bit intimidating when you are like in your 20s, in your early 20s, and someone has 20 years of experience in the field. But he has been working for more than 20 years now in the space, working with agricultural practices, with international development. But more important, we have been working also together for the Food System Summit. He was co-chair for the Action Track 3. No, you were chair for the Action Track 3, boosting nature positive production.
At scale.
At scale. Perfect. Great. You will introduce the panel. Thank you so much.
I can.
No, this is not working. Okay. But I'm tested negative, so.
Yeah, what you forgot to say that I have 20 some years of experience in food systems and all of that, and I'm only 25, so I don't know, there's a time lapse somewhere. No, very happy to have you here. I was going to thank Gonzalo because he said he was going to leave the address to his farm so we could all go get some wine with him, but he left. But Federico is here, and you can probably give us the address for Gonzalo's farm. We all want to visit now that we found out this facet of his life too. So very good. Well, I'll tell you one thing. There is an internal joke to the Food Forward, which is really not a joke. We are introducing also SDG 18. And the SDG 18 means we know everything, we talked about everything, the science is clear, the evidence is all there, we need to take action, okay? So, in short, it's like, let's cut the BS and start the work. So that's the thing. So this is all what this consortium is for. The consortium is a start, right? It's a vehicle of delivering action, to accelerate action. We all depart from the premise and the principle that there are 9 harvests, less than 9 harvests left right now to deliver the SDGs. And we can't miss them. Like our good friend Gunhild always says, what we do with the food systems in the next few years will determine what will happen to the next 1,000. We are in a state of planetary emergency. This is not an apocalyptical statement. It's true. There are tipping points happening everywhere. I am from Brazil, and there are parts of the Amazon, of course not all of it, that has become a carbon emitter, not a carbon sink. So this is very, very worrisome. It's not a joke. It's not, sometimes we hear, this is not an NGO thing. This is happening, and we need to change things around. Okay, so this is what Food Forward is all about. So I'm delighted that we had the previous panel, and we are all about accelerating change. And to hear what this means in practice to accelerate change, I have a wonderful panel here. Let me introduce, I'm going to sit down for a bit so that I can see them. Hi, everyone. We have Anne Paul Enovoldsen. She is the Director of Sustainable Diet and Health at the Danish Veterinary and Food Administration. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
Take this one.
Is it working now? No?
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. This maybe works? No, work.
Works. Okay, back in action. All right, so we have our good friend Lawrence Haddad. Hi, Lawrence. Lawrence is wonderful to see you.
I thought you were 27, so thanks for correcting me.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting to maturity. So Lawrence is the executive director of GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. He is also the 2018 awardee of the World Food Prize, and he is the former chair of Action Track 1 of the UN Food System Summit. So welcome. Too bad you can't be here physically with us, but in spirit you are, and here we'll see you on the screen. We also have Vijay is not here yet, but hopefully he will join us soon. And we also have Martin Frick. Martin was is our seventh musketeer, as we said in the previous panel. Martin was the deputy of the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food System Summit 2021, and is now the director of the World Food Programme's Global Office in Berlin. Welcome, Martin. And finally, our last panelist here that I'm going to introduce is Jemima Njuki. Jemima is the director of Africa for the International Food Policy Research Institute, and she also led the gender lever for the UN Food System Summit. So these are our distinguished friends and panelists. And let me start with Anne. Anne, you know, there's a lot that we talk about the role of diets in climate and nature, and Denmark has such a wonderful experience with this. Can you share more, please?
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. In Denmark, we've taken the first steps towards a more healthy and sustainable diet. We've sort of tried to create a common ground in the discussion what a healthy and sustainable diet could look like. So in January, we launched our new food-based dietary guidelines called the Official Dietary Guidelines Good for Health and Climate. So we sort of started out in one corner of sustainability. Of course, we based our work on scientific evidence regarding both nutrition, health, and also sustainability. And in our process, we had a lot of efforts in involving a broad range of stakeholders, from universities, other authorities, but also consumer organizations, non-governmental organizations, as well as the food and the retail industry. And we also tested the guidelines among the consumers. It has been very new to us and also very challenging to incorporate climate considerations in our guidelines without, on one hand, compromising the health aspects, and on the second hand, also in order to tackle the gap between what the population is actually eating right now, what our food culture looks like, and what we think could be beneficial if it comes to both climate and health. And of course, we're looking into meat consumption of dairies on one hand, which is relatively high in Denmark, especially the meat. And on the other hand, we need to raise, for example, the consumption of legumes, which is almost non-existing in Denmark. So we have quite a challenge here. But we have, as I said, had a lot of work in involving our stakeholders, which we think is crucial to ensure the implementation. We've had a lot of valuable discussions regarding how to formulate and how to communicate these new guidelines. And I know that there can be a bit of fear that, for example, the industry might get too much influence if you involve them in a process like this. And of course, we have not been discussing the evidence. We have only been discussing how to sort of translate the evidence in something that consumers and the sectors can use. So that's part of the journey we've been in, and also these climate-friendly guidelines is one of the Danish game changers at the UN Food System Summers, and part of our national pathway. And of course, we're happy to share our experiences in this Healthy Diets Coalition, hopefully. Also, I have to stress that these guidelines is just like a cornerstone, but they don't work on their own. So that's why we have a lot of work going on in several parts of public-private partnerships. These ensures us a continuous and systematic dialogue with stakeholders from different sectors. And by joining forces with other sectors and stakeholders through these partnerships, we can create space to share the latest evidence. We can solve issues between regulation and guidelines and the practical market implementation, which is very crucial. And of course, we can work together towards common goals. So this is something, I don't know if it's quite unique, but it's at least a part of the Danish DNA, and something that we put a lot of efforts in since we have had good experiences with that. I think that's it for now.
And thank you so much. I have a follow-up question. It's really quick because it's amazing to see what you have done in Denmark. Are you sharing your experience with other countries?
We are happy to share our experience with everyone who would like to know that. We have shared our experience, for example, with the WHO, telling them about the process. That's something that happened last year. Now we're dealing with how we get these guidelines in work, because it's quite a job to formulate them, but I think the most important job is to actually implement them. So that's the difficult part now, but we'll be happy to share with everyone who would like to get in more detail, because this is just, a brief sharing. There are lots more detail and a lot more problems that I have been revealing here.
Thank you so much. Such a complex issue, but I congratulate you and your government for taking this step. It's amazing. Congratulations. Now, Lawrence, I have a question for you. In many countries, there is a tendency for the dietary guidelines to move away from animal source foods and more plant-based diets. But this is not true everywhere, right? So to effectively address malnutrition while meeting the goals of climate or nature and delivering resilience to communities, alleviating poverty, eliminating hunger, how can different communities, for example, nutrition and climate, come together to achieve both of these goals? And this is such an important aspect of COP26. Over to you.
Thank you, Zhao. And thank you to WWF for their leadership in putting this panel together. It's a delight to be here. Zhao, the UNFSS, the summit, I think it delivered a couple of really stark messages to everybody. The first one is that nutrition goals can't be achieved at the expense of climate goals. But I think equally, climate goals can't be achieved at the expense of nutrition goals. And you alluded to it. In most low-income countries, only 20% of infants and young children achieve a minimum diet quality. Minimum diet diversity is what we call it. Minimum. Think about that. Minimum 20%. And I think it was Gonzalo, the previous speaker, was saying about how what we're trying to do is like give birth, and it's painful to give birth, but a lot of these kids die in childbirth because of poor maternal malnutrition as well. So there's a real problem. Their diet is crying out, they are crying out for more fruits, vegetables, green leafy vegetables, yes, but also they need animal source foods too, like eggs, dairy, fish, chicken, goat. So whether we like it or not, consumption of animal source foods is going to go through the roof in most Asian and African countries. Why is it going to do that? It's going to do it because of population growth. I was looking, I'm here with in Berlin with my Nigeria country director, and he was telling me that the projections for Nigeria population, 400 million by 2050 and 800 million by 2100. I mean, that is extraordinary. But it's not just population growth that's driving up the demand for these foods, it's also income growth. And you've seen what's happened in China, that will continue. And, India is growing. India is one of the fastest growing, it is the fastest growing large economy. The GDP per capita of India, the IMF tells us, is about $7,500 per person per year right now. That's scheduled to double by 2025, and that's including the downturn from COVID. So all of this is going to make this increase in animal source food and consumption of them inevitable. We may be able to moderate some of it, but in Africa and Asia especially, it's going to increase, and it's essential for many of the vulnerable population groups. So the question is how to decouple these increases from increases in greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, that, to me, that is the question. It's about how to prevent future massive growth in greenhouse gases. That will happen because of the increase in animal source food consumption. So I think it will require kind of a combination, Zhao, of imagination. You know, it's really hard to think about the future, but we have to, and this is why it's so important to have youth and people like Marie Claire with us at every step of the way, working with us and we working with them to think about the future. They can imagine the future better than we can. We need to think about incentives. There are all range of fiscal incentives that can be, you know, you want to generate public goods, will generate incentives that lead to those public goods being generated. All throughout the UN Food System Summit, we were told no new institutions. This is nonsensical. I mean, honestly, the institutions that we have got us into this place in the first place. So we need new institutions. How can you break down silos without new institutions? You absolutely need to do that. We need new infrastructure. A great example from Action Track 1 was the Cool Coalition. They were talking about multi-use cool chains that can be used for vaccines and food, and that could have a circular economy dimension. They would never be empty because it's just too much of a missed opportunity to have them empty. And finally, we need innovations. Can we produce animal source foods in a regenerative way at low scale in low income contexts? These are the challenges, I think, that are right at the overlap of nutrition and climate. And I suspect this is the main future agenda. How to ensure undernutrition is addressed while minimizing future greenhouse gas increases and potentially even decoupling them entirely. Back to you, Zhao.
Lawrence, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of. We have a triple challenge, right? And the triple challenge is food insecurity and malnutrition, climate change, and biodiversity loss. These three aspects are interconnected, and they it's like an interacting force. You cannot resolve them by parts, right? Otherwise you will run into suboptimal solutions. We cannot afford suboptimal solutions. We need to integrate people and nature and climate agendas to nutrition, livelihoods, and rights.
But Zhao, if I'm allowed to interrupt, I also really like what Gonzalo said about, we need to keep it simple too. Because if we come up with beautiful, optimal solutions that no one can implement, that's just a waste of time as well.
Absolutely. And for that, what he also said is like we need to reframe and rethink, reboot our thinking and get retrained. So how can we get schools to begin to teach things that are practical, right?
Yeah.
And so and enable action. And as you well reminded us, Lawrence, for Marie Claire and the youth are super important. They are stakeholders, important stakeholders. They have to come to the negotiations table more and more. So thank you.
We mustn't replace one kind of brainwashing with another.
No.
So that's where the evidence comes in.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Lawrence. And one aspect of this trying to resolve the triple challenge is resilience, right? I mean, and Martin, I have a question to you now. Can you tell us more about how food systems transformation also helps us to build food systems that are resilient to shocks and stresses? Over to you.
Well, thanks, Joao, and a pleasure to be here and meet every one of you. I'm in my new function here with the Global Office at WFP, and let me maybe start this with a WFP number. There's much talk about climate refugees, and that's a difficult concept for all sorts of reasons. But what we often don't see is that those who are really the poorest can't even migrate. They are internally displaced. We have currently 30 million internally displaced people because of climate, 3 times the number of people internally displaced because of conflict. So building resilience is an absolute imperative. Also talking about geopolitics, people will not sit still and suffer and die. So if you want to have global stability, it starts with food systems. And some of the work that we have been doing in the Food System Summit points exactly in that. My pet example is always large-scale land restoration. If you succeed to restore land, and restoring land is actually technically not difficult, but it's a societal and a social engineering exercise, you basically have a point in case how you can build this resilience against shocks. First, you need to bring the societies together. There's a lot of peace and reconciliation work which is needed for that. But if you succeed to restore land, you are basically mitigating the root causes of conflict. You're rebuilding the water tables, you're creating with agroforestry, for example, resilience against landslides. You're ultimately providing people with income and livelihoods. And if you continue diversifying income from different sources of crops, if you go away from the 5 cash crops we have now in the global trade, and you basically come back with forgotten crops, with more diverse production methods, you are meeting so many needs at the same time. I spoke about the empowerment of communities on building income, but you're certainly reconstructing biodiversity, and you're restoring the soil organic carbon that is so essential for fertility and is ultimately the easiest and biggest drawdown solution we have there. Last sentence, all of this is only possible by what Christiana Figueres called radical cooperation. And I think the Food Forward Consortium is building on 500 highly committed individuals from all walks of life, from indigenous leaders to academics, from people working in the economy to youth leaders such as Marie-Claire, and I'm very happy to see you there. This is precisely what we need. We need to keep this multi-stakeholder spirit alive. We need to bridge our borders, and ultimately also we have to go to those people and institutions who are providing funding and advertise and advocate really for a much broader picture of what we want to achieve on this planet, because resilience and resilience against climate shocks cannot be reached in isolation. Back to you, Joao.
Martin, thank you so much for these insightful comments and remarks. And another aspect of resilience is about rights, correct? I mean, so let's bring more of the people element into this conversation. So many of those who will feel the impacts of climate change more acutely are the world's poorest. So I have a question for Jemima now. Jemima, when we design policies, and you are at IFPRI now, for climate change, for biodiversity loss, not all of them are including rights and livelihoods. How do we improve the livelihoods of the world's poorest populations, particularly women and girls, into the climate agenda, into the nature agenda? Over to you, Jemima.
Thank you very much, Joao and WWF, for organizing this. I want to start by saying, actually, you talked about 7 musketeers, and I think you do need an eighth musketeer in that team, because we really cannot talk about addressing the climate crisis without talking about gender equality and the rights of the poor, the rights of women, and the rights of girls. So this really has to be central to the agenda. Prior to the Food System Summit, we had a lot of consultations around the world with women rights organizations, with organizations working on gender equality. And it was very, very clear that we really have to put the voices, the needs, the priorities of those that are most marginalized at the center of the food systems conversation, but also at the center of addressing climate change. And there's a couple of things that I think we need to be much more intentional about when we develop policies, when we develop programs. One is expanding the voices and the leadership and the agency of women, making sure that they are at the table. But they're not just at the table, but that their needs and priorities actually become the guiding principle, that the right to food, the right to resources become the guiding principles that we actually use in our policy making and in our programming. Because their dignity matters and has to be upfront. Part of the actions that we have taken after the Food Systems Summit is the Global Food 50/50, and thank you, Lawrence, for really being a champion for that, to make sure that our food systems organizations, including those working on climate change, that actually are actioning things in an equitable way, but that they are equitable in themselves, that the voices, the leadership of women, of girls, of those most affected by climate are actually being heard. The second thing that I think is really, really important, and we talk about this a lot, the access to resources and services that the poor, the marginalized, the women need to actually adapt to climate change, that they need to better their livelihoods, that they need to address hunger and malnutrition. Whether this is right to land, we have seen that when women actually have rights to the land that they cultivate, that they make more investments in climate smart agriculture. So we have this evidence. So why do we continue to develop policies that are still gender blind, land systems and regulations and policies that actually still leave out women? So these are things that we know work. And as you said earlier in your remarks, the BS of having global leaders, country leaders come together and say, oh, women are so important, and then still go ahead and develop policies and programs that actually do not intentionally try to close these gaps. Extension systems, as we move more towards digital inclusion, we know there are key gaps in the use of digital tools when it comes to gender. Women are 50% less likely to use the internet than men are because of lack of access to internet services, because of literacy issues. But it's not even just a gender question. 88% of online content is available in just 1 out of 10 languages. So if you then are trying to use digital tools, digital services in a continent like Africa, you've got to be much more intentional about reaching people where they are in languages that they understand, with tools that they have access to. But underlying these gaps, we know is a lot of social and gender norms that require a whole societal change, that requires, there was a conversation earlier on re-education. It's not just about agriculture, it's re-education around the place of women in society. How do we see women and girls as leaders? How do we change the perceptions, whether it's within financial institutions, the education system, that women are leaders, that girls are leaders and can lead change. And finally, I would say we still have a lot of policies, regulations, institutional barriers that are preventing women and girls from playing these rightful places that are major causes of these gaps. Financial institutions that are not developing products for women, laws and regulations, policies at national level that still do not guarantee rights to resources for women. So we need a lot of that institutional change if we want to see meaningful large-scale change in terms of rights of those that are most affected by both the climate crisis, but also our unequal food systems.
Jemima, thank you so much for your reflections. And now I would like to bring all of this together. I mean, I would like to introduce you to Vijay Kumar Talum. Vijay works for, he's the executive vice vice chairman of India's government Corporation for Farmers Empowerment. He's also the special chief secretary to the government of Andhra Pradesh on natural farming in India. And he's also a member of the was a member of the Champions Network for the UN Food Systems Summit. So Vijay, can you help us bring all of this together? What happens on the ground? You are running this beautiful program on natural farming in India, which has a wonderful component on inclusion and gender with the self-help groups. So can you enlighten us and what's happening in Andhra Pradesh? How do you see more nature-positive production systems being implemented across the world without sacrificing food supplies, without sacrificing, trying to resolve hunger and nutrition, all of this? Bring it all home to us, Vijay. What happens on the ground? Over to you.
Thank you, Joe. A tall order, but I'll try. I think, first of all, what was very important in Andhra Pradesh was the relationship between government and people. Over 20 years ago, we took the decision that we need to, women's empowerment is critical for poverty eradication. So in the year 2000, we initiated this program, and as on date, around 8.7 million rural women are organized into women self-help groups, their federations, which are dealing with financial issues, livelihoods issues, social issues, issues of discrimination, so a wide range of issues. And so building this platform was a very conscious decision of government. So I think governments need to really change the way they work with citizens, respecting women, and having policies and resources in place. I think that is the very important step. So it's the changing the mindsets of governments, not top-down approaches, not fiats, not dictates, but a different kind of partnership with citizens, which I think is very important. And I never realized, Zhao, when I was working on women's empowerment 20 years ago, there will be a day when the same, women self-help group will be the champions of climate resilient natural farming. So today, if I have to visualize that all farmers in Andhra Pradesh and all farm workers in Andhra Pradesh transform to natural farming, I'm able to do it in a very short time frame because they're already organized. So we have around 5.7 million farmers and about 2.5 million landless farm workers. So we can imagine all of them coming together and bringing this change. The second is, I think there's also a need for mindset change within government, scientific institutions, the formal institutions, because we have got locked into the green revolution, external inputs, harmful chemicals, as if they are the most essential ingredients. And unfortunately, the farmers are also believing that this is required for the continuous production. And it's also partly hidden in your question when you're saying that can agroecology take care of the food security issues? Our experience shows that natural farming or agroecology has solutions for productivity, production, for nutrition, for climate change resilience. So the behavior change of all of us, and very important behavior change of farmers, to first come out of this trap that you need these external inputs. So I think this is really the difficult part, and that was made possible in our system because of the network of women, the network of farmers organizations, and our belief that farmers themselves are the best trainers, farmers themselves are the best scientists. So we invested in building farmers' capacities, building in women's capacities to make these changes possible. And I also very strongly believe that the kind of breakthroughs that we have achieved on this journey are also telling us that also the question of trade-offs is also illusory. Farming in harmony with nature can actually take care of reforestation, rewilding, in addition to meeting food and nutrition security, meeting the protein requirements, and more important, Lawrence is here, the kind of micronutrient and trace mineral deficiencies in children and adults. I think there are solutions, but it also requires us to sort of change our mindset. Governments, scientists, bankers, and people. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Vijay. We need to accelerate action on the ground. You know, commitments are great, they're needed, but through work like the one that you are conducting on the ground is super important to deliver the SDGs. So thank you very much. So now we've had the chance to talk to our panelists. You heard their remarks, and they all informed ways for the Food Forward Consortium to act as a vehicle of transformation and accelerate change. Now it's your time to ask questions. So what we will do, we'll take questions from the audience here, and Peter will help me with questions that might happen over Zoom. Okay? So anyone would like to ask any of our panelists a question? Okay, let me stand up now here. Okay, good. When you do, please state your name and what organization, if any, you're in, please. The mics are challenging us here.
Hello?
Now we can hear you.
Luke. Can you?
Yes and no. No, it's the mic. It's the mic.
Thank you. Hello? Okay, that's better.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Luke. I'm here with the youth constituency, and I wanted to ask Lawrence Haddad a question following from his remarks about the need for new institutions and how they would be different from existing new institutions and how they could help.
Who would you like to address the
Lawrence.
question? Lawrence. Go ahead, Lawrence. You heard the question?
Yeah, thank you, Luke. Nice to see you and hear you. Look, I think I don't have any specifics for you, but I think the new institutions need to fit around the things that we want to encourage. We want to encourage, we don't want to be driven into little silos anymore. We want to be able to look across all the sectors and all the stakeholders. So we develop institutions that allow us to do that. We develop institutions that allow us to and encourage us to dig deeper. I think Vijay mentioned mindsets need to change. That's absolutely the case. How many of the institutions we currently have are completely fixed with a fixed narrative? So the only narrative should be there is no narrative. You know, the only narrative is we need to do what needs to be done. SDG 18. And I think the institutions, the new institutions need to also be much more inclusive of youth. They need to have youth at the core of everything that's done. You know, I'm a supporter and an ally of youth. I don't always agree with what my young colleagues say, but I always respect what they say, and I always will respect and engage with them on what they say, and I expect them to do the same with me. So I think, you know, these are just some of the things. I'd also like to see a much more rounded and grounded sets of institutions that don't allow North America and Europe to be hegemonic in their view, because I think they are very, and I contribute to that. I'm part of that. I think that needs to be counterbalanced. And I think there needs to be institutions that somehow can connect as well as horizontally, vertically. I was talking to my country director from Kenya yesterday. I'm here with her in Berlin, and she was saying, You know, Lawrence, these national dialogues, these national pathways are all very well in Kenya, but all the action in Kenya is at the county level. That's where all the money is. That's where all the decisions get made, and any kind of decision can get made. So basically, our institutions have to be fit for purpose. Most of them were formed in the 20th century. We need to update them for the 21st century. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence. Thanks for the question. Peter, anything on the chat? Oh, I thought we were going to take one from the audience, one from the chat. Just to...
we can ask from here. Maybe.
What is that?
Yeah, there's one in the chat, but it's what opportunities will there be for new organizations or individuals to be able to get involved with the consortium? So a more general, broad question about how to work alongside the consortium.
This is great. I mean, you know, the consortium is, it's for everyone. It's just, we're just starting it. So, you know, we have 6 organizations that are joining hands and minds and hearts to work together to accelerate delivery. Anyone can join in the consortium. We are designing the consortium. This is the first launch of the idea, and this is meant to be like a consultation process. But yes, we do want to engage people, organizations from everywhere. Let me ask the other, Lawrence, you are in the consortium as well. Anything that you would like to add?
No, I mean, we're trying to, it's a great question, and we're trying to get the balance right between being inclusive. Of course, you know, the 6 organizations who have founded this, we certainly don't have a monopoly on wisdom or action at all. We founded this because we need, I think it was it Martin said collective radicalism. I like that a lot. That's what we need, radical cooperation. But if it becomes a cast of thousands, then it becomes difficult to figure out what to do and how to act and how to prioritize. So it's about getting that balance right. But the default setting is inclusivity.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now the question from the audience.
Okay, thank you for your time. My name is Ezra. I'm from Indonesia. I represent IAS, International Association of Students in Agriculture and Related Sciences. So maybe more than, rather than a question, I want to make not really a statement, but I want to put it out there so the panel maybe can think about this. Yeah. Sorry, I'm opening this. So we are part of youth in agriculture, and you mentioned that we are taught the wrong thing. Like agriculture, we need to produce more food, and we did not mind the nature sometimes. This is true, like especially in a student in agriculture, that really happened. And we are really interested in, we do campaign in food waste, no plastic, and we have village concept project, which many of our village concept project include women, farmer women group, and we make local product with local commodities like virgin coconut oil and cookies, home-based, things like that. So involving the youth can become a great idea, especially students in agricultural and related sciences, because we do have the knowledge and we do have the connection with people. We have this jargon in IAS, think globally, act locally. So yeah, because we are an international program, we do have like sharing mind, things like that, and we act locally. So that become maybe can be a great help. So involve youth more, because we have the connection to the people and students also, that in a decade or more years will stand in your position. So we have the good foundation for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and the questions. The panel, would you like to react to what we've heard? 30 seconds. 30 seconds, anyone?
I'll go. I mean, I think You know, we talked about mindsets earlier on, and when you're in college and when you're a student, this is when your worldviews get crystallized and your mindsets get established, and it's very hard to shake those. And I think so. This is another reason why youth need to get involved. Also, as you said, youth are brilliant at acting locally and thinking globally, and we need more of that. So, I completely endorse everything you said.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thanks, everyone. On behalf of the Food Forward Consortium, we are delighted to have you here live or on the screen. Keep sending us your ideas. We are here to accelerate delivery. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists and for everybody. Marie-Claire, over to you.
Thank you for moderating. Thanks for everyone joining. Thank you for our wonderful virtual panel. Vijay, Anne is not here on screen, but thank you so much. Laurence, Martin is also not here anymore, and Maina, thank you so much for making it today. Also, thank you, Sandrine, Gunhild, Salim, for joining. While we had, like this year, no food day, I think it's something really important for next COP to push collectively that next year, COP27, we have a food day and we can celebrate all of these game-changing solutions. We can really push forward, so this is an action point for all of us. But also there's so many things we can do in between. We all know the COP, there is so many things happening. That's why I let you run like in a second. But let us all work together to really build this momentum for the next year for the COP, that we have food system at the heart, at the COP, here in the pavilions, but also in the negotiation halls, because this is where the decisions are taken. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And also, if you have any further questions for the Food Forward Consortium, there are very brilliant people here. Also, thank you, everyone, for the tech team, for making this hybrid event possible, and everyone who's working behind the scene. Thank you so much. But let's keep them like on. Maybe we can have Lawrence stay. Lawrence, there can you stay? Can we put